Hello and welcome to A Good Old Natter With. I'm Babster, and today I have with me Mr. Craig Turner. Now, a bit of a disclaimer with this episode. My Wi-Fi decided to play up on the day of recording, so the video might seem out of sync in places, but it's a good watch. It's a good listen. So I hope you enjoy the episode. And I'll see you later. So, Craig, how you doing, mate?
Sound.
Good. It's good to have you finally on. Anyway.
Finally on, I know. Yeah, I did wonder. I saw Wayne on there the other week, and I was like, oh yeah, I wonder when you get me on finally.
Well, I had him round here.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. You had him around your yard, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, he's only up the road, really. To be fair.
And you know what? I didn't realise that when we went on a bit of a jaunt the other week, and I asked him to pick me up, thinking he was only round the corner.
Yeah.
He works round the corner from me, but he didn't hear you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean you're in like Walsall area, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Right. So first question I reckon is what was your first computer or console, mate?
My first console anyway. We had one of the, the early grandstand consoles, the like the Pong consoles.
Yeah.
We had one of those in our house. I mean, I was a nipper then, but my brother was mad on computer games, as you'd expect. And that we had a grandstand 4600, and it was the Kevin Keegan special. And for anybody who knows the grandstand consoles, it had a picture of Kevin Keegan on the front promoting it, because obviously they advertised that they did loads of different sports, like it was it tennis, hockey, squash, things like that. So it's just the same game, just a Pong game, innit? So yeah, it was sponsored by Kevin Keegan, and his permed barn. It was on the front of that. So.
I remember that. That was the one with the orange buttons and selectors, wasn't it?
Yeah. They did a few different versions, but the coolest thing about it, I only really recently discovered the exact model it was, because I was looking around and I really wanted to get my first system back, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I had to hunt around a lot. Whenever I spoke to other people about it, nobody knew what I was talking about, because I'd refer to it, and the way I always remembered it was it had this awesome gun, which you'd never be allowed to make now. And the gun, it's like made of Bakelite. It's a crap thing.
Yeah.
But it looks like a proper, like a pistol. It looks like Han Solo's pistol from Star Wars, but then you could bolt on this section at the back like a stock. And a long nozzle, and it turned it into a rifle, like a proper rifle. And when I talk to people about it, it's like, no way, you'd never get away with that now.
I can't remember that. Cannot remember that.
They actually released a gun with several different versions of it. And once I found out which one it was, I jumped online and I found the version that we had in the colour scheme that we had it in. Ours was like grey, because the two Pong controllers kind of slotted neatly in, but they pulled out them with their own wires. And then you could swap out and plug in the light gun separately. And thankfully, I managed to find the right one, complete with the gun and all the bits that go with it, because usually those parts are missing. It's got two different length barrels, a sight, and then, like I say, the stock like clamps onto the back. It's an awesome thing.
Oh wow, yeah. I honestly cannot remember that.
Well, I meant to do a video on it at one point myself, and I just kind of I stopped doing videos because I was too busy with other things. But I've still got it, and the next like event and stuff we do, it'll probably be out, because probably going to do something special with their Pong consoles actually. So.
Okay. Now you mentioned the events. How did Retro Revival? How did that start? What gave you the idea with that?
I've got my head together with Chris Wilkins. I was building arcade machines. I started building arcade machines in 2002, I think my first build was. Okay. And then I built a couple for myself, built them for friends. And then I was building for years, and that was about the year that I started. Like once 2000 turned, I started looking back. It was like when the PS2 and stuff was out.
Yeah.
So I started looking back at my gaming, and the more I look back, I kind of fell out of love with the PlayStation, and I started looking at my history then. So I was building the arcade machines, and then you start to find yourself more involved in forums and what's going on online, and
Yeah.
what everybody else is doing. And through a matter of channels, I ended up exhibiting at the very first replay in Blackpool in 2010, and there I met a lot of people on the event scene who are still around now, but everybody kind of splintered off and did their own thing. So me and Chris got our heads together, and when it was evident that replay were going in a different direction, they wanted to introduce modern gaming. They wanted to do all generations, and they wanted to go commercial and do what they wanted to do. Me and Chris were talking a lot, and at that time, and I said, this ain't what I really want to do. I don't like that kind of thing. I'm not that interested in modern gaming. And a lot of people at that point, we were mixing a lot with other people on the scene at different small pocket events and meets and monthly get-togethers and stuff. And people were saying, we want something that's purely retro. So like we started thinking about it, we started talking about it, and at the time Chris was he was just starting to he'd tried a magazine a couple of years before. He'd done a couple of small events, and he said, I want to get back to that, like I want to try it again, because nothing was really kind of catching, if you know what I mean. And I says, well, we've got better contacts now. I says, we've got more equipment between us. I know a lot of people who can give us a hand. A lot of people are coming to me to do this. And at the time, nobody really saw just how well connected we were. And I think he caught a lot of people off guard. And he'd done the Kickstarter for his first book, the Ocean book. And if anybody who knows the Fusion Retro book stuff, the first edition has got Revivalretroevents branded on the spine because it was released as a Revivalretroevents product at the time. He did the Kickstarter for that, and using some of the funds from that, the first event was held because it was kind of a launcher for the book, if you know what I mean. So we did the first event, it went down okay, did the second event, so it was 2013, 2014, and then Chris just decided he wanted to just focus on the books, so I carried on, and I just wanted to do the events, and from there, it just broke off. I started helping out at other conventions, other Comic Cons, other little gaming conventions, little collectors fairs and stuff like that. And I was doing 6-7 events a year, just helping out, providing equipment, promoting ourselves, selling our tickets at those other events, and through networking, it just grows,
Yeah. So was it 2013? Was that your first one?
Yeah, 2013 was the first event. We did in 2012. We got our heads together because that was the time that Replay kind of went in their direction. They went grand and started doing the newer stuff, and we just said, no, I want to do a pure retro one. So 2012, we started putting the plans in motion. It took well over a year. We started getting people involved, like RCM, one of our early collaborators on that. There was RCM, there was a bunch of individuals, and the name escapes me of a lot of them because a lot of them now aren't still there. I had to build like a new team.
Okay.
Because the first year it was a novelty, and once people start seeing just how much work goes into it, it scares a lot of people off. So people have come and gone over the years and helping out and that. But yeah, the 2013 was big. 2014 was bigger. Scaled it back for 2015 because that was when Chris first departed, and then I just started to go back up again, and it got way bigger than the first events did when we moved it to Bescott Stadium.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a journey for sure, and obviously now we're 10 years on from there, and the name's still going, so doing something right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think first event I attended to was a 2014 one.
Yeah.
And then I don't think I missed any event after that. Then I absolutely loved it. I took my son with me, got him into the the retro scene.
Yeah.
It's weird because I was completely oblivious to all the events previous to that, because retro for me has never been retro. I've always just played games no matter
Yeah,
what year, whether it's modern or old, it's never been any different to me. 'Cause you've seen loads of people just jump on that bandwagon, haven't you? Oh, it's retro now, it's big, quick, let's get
yeah,
into it.
yeah,
You know, the only thing that I'm doing different now is I'm recording stuff, but I'm not doing anything different. So I'm not just suddenly, oh, I'm going to play retro games now. I've always done
yeah.
it.
I think it's one of those things. I mean, the last 10 years has probably been the 2010s is when it started to explode. The mid 2000s is obviously when the last of Generation X, which obviously we're from.
Mm.
Um, that's when we all start. You know, we were in our 20s, 30s, and that's when you start looking back. So when you start getting nostalgic in it.
Yeah,
And I think we got the advantage that we grew up on the entire video game industry. It didn't
yeah,
exist before us. Well, I say we weren't responsible for it, but we were the first consumers of it when we were young kids, and then we grew up on it, and so obviously we started looking back to the finer times when there was a lot more innovation and things like that. So yeah, it makes sense really that it kind of never left us. I don't know if there'll be the same nostalgia for today's gaming for kids as we had for when we were gaming as kids, because
no,
I honestly don't know the way the market's going. But yeah, and I know what you're saying, and definitely the mid 2000s, like I say, Chris did a couple of minor retro focused events with a few people, but then the 2010s, obviously, Replay did it first by investigating that and doing the first Replay event, and then obviously we wanted to keep it pure retro after that, and then I'm guessing it probably peaked for a lot of people around 2015, 16, and that was the point that our events just started to get massive because there was a lot more people interested in it. There's still future generations interested in it. So with families and stuff getting into it as well, and obviously the amount of things. I mean, the technology's been there for a good few years,
yeah,
but there's a lot more accessible ways to play retro games now.
mm,
We're nostalgic for the original hardware and things like that, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with emulation. I play daily on emulation. I don't play daily on my old consoles because I haven't got the room in my house to set all that up.
no,
I've got all the gear, but it's just not practical to do that. And right next to me here now, as it happens, I'm always working on something. This is my kitchen table, and I've got an Amstrad Mega PC next to me here that I'm working on at the moment,
oh well,
installing some games and stuff into. I,
yeah,
I, and I can prove it because I've got the fascia plate off at the moment,
yeah,
and there's the fascia plate for the Amstrad Mega PC, one
wow,
that slides across and switches between the Mega Drive and the Mega PC. So yeah, I'm working on that at the moment.
yeah.
Um, and of course I'm always doing something related to it. So when it comes to my actual gaming, emulation is just the way to do it. I've got quite a few of the mini consoles. I've got the SNES Mini, I've got the PlayStation Mini. I'd like to get the Mega Drive Mini. It's not a chance yet, and I will get the PC Engine Mini once it's actually cracked, because they still haven't, for some reason, they haven't cracked that one.
Right, yeah. I do like the minis, I must admit. And I do like when they're hacked.
Yeah,
Um, for Christmas, I had the Amiga one, the Amiga Mini.
yeah, the A500 Mini.
Yeah, um, I haven't even opened it yet.
And no, it's the one I haven't actually got, but Aaron off our team, he's got one. I think a couple of the guys have got it,
Yeah.
and I've heard it's good, but it's they've not perfected it yet. If you know what I mean, like
No, I mean
there's some compatibility issues.
it's all down to how you look at it, isn't it? I mean, if you're just going to compare the main machine with that, you're always going to find faults, aren't you? Um,
Yeah, I think
and
most of the stuff you want to play is playable straight at the bottom, but then when you start adding your own stuff to it, that's when you start noticing things. So I suppose it depends how into it you are. I mean, the first mini consoles were the same issue, but obviously they were never really meant to be used in that way, and the games that were put on there operate exactly how Nintendo wanted you to, and how Sega wanted them to. So, that they do what they're supposed to do. It just depends how far you want to go with hacking it. I mean, at the core of everything is it was Linux originally. There was a lot of Linux handhelds that did emulation,
yeah,
and I started messing with those in the early 2000s. So I was excited to see where it was going. I don't know if you remember the Pandora project. That was the first one that really attracted me to it, and that came out in 2010 finally, and they talked about that a couple of years before, and that was like only the first handheld powerful enough to emulate PS1 flawlessly, and they did do that, but they took so long in getting that built. And you got to remember, smartphones only became a thing just before that, so mobile technology didn't really start leaping until around 2010 to become powerful enough to create these little micro consoles, you know. And in the last 10 years, I mean, they're incredible now. I mean, you've got the Steam Deck is probably like, I mean, I know that's not quite the same, but the Steam Deck as a handheld is ridiculously powerful.
Oh, blimey, yeah. Well, it's a game. It's a gaming PC in your hand, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous powerful. But you can pick up like, I mean, PSP was the one, but PlayStation Vita is probably the best emulation handheld you can get, because I mean, it's not as powerful as some of the ones coming out of China now, but it's a hell of a lot better built than some of the crap coming out of China. There's loads of great little, like the Ambernic and things like that. There's loads of little micro consoles, handhelds come out of China, but they're built like crap and they tend to fall apart, unfortunately, as powerful as they are. But of course, as people now, the Pi and things like that have become far more accessible. People build their own little micro consoles now, and they make these little emulation rigs.
Yeah, yeah. I've used the retro Pi quite a lot.
Yeah.
Building, you know, the little IKEA arcade machines that you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know you've got like a loathe for them, haven't you, because of your arcade genuine. I mean, don't get me wrong. I totally get that. I totally get it. There's nothing like standing at an original arcade. There isn't. Yeah. There's no feeling like that, because it takes me right back to being a kid. But I have had some fun, building the IKEA jobbies and whatever with the controls, and it's not perfect, but again, it's another access to emulation, if you like.
Yeah.
But they'll never be as good as real arcade machines. But again, who's got the room to have all those arcade machines?
Don't get me wrong. I certainly haven't got my objections, even when it comes to emulation in arcade machines, because I mean, as you know, I'm a collector, and it's impossible to keep the things running. You got to try and keep it as stock as possible. But I think as long as you keep it original on the outside, and use the proper screen, use the proper CRT screen, use keep the cabinet as original as possible, use proper quality arcade controls, not the crap that's been made in recent years.
Yeah.
But then as far as the brain goes that runs inside it, I've got no objections to running a PC inside a Pi or whatever you need to do, because emulation is so accurate now, especially for the older games. You know, the emulation is so accurate, there's no reason not to stick something reliable in there. And you get the advantage that you can easily change settings, you can easily hook up a wide range of controls, you can fine-tune controls, you can even remap entire control panels and things like that, which you can't do on with original hardware. So emulation's definitely got its place. My objection comes with the Pi in that it took too long to arrive. I followed the project for years. It took too long to arrive to market, and I get why it's popular with people now, but I just don't really get on with it. You have to find too many things to plug into it. There's a lot of faffing about. You're still dependent heavily on a PC to use it. I much prefer to use Android sticks or Android handhelds, and then to take them apart, because Android is so well catered for in terms of emulators off the shelf and things like that, front ends. There's little reason not to use something like that where you've got a store built in. You can strip it back and make it a lot more efficient, just like a Windows PC, you have to strip those back to get the best performance out of it for an emulation rig. You have to do similar with Android, but at least at the core you've got something that out of the box anybody can use. You can easily dump software on there, whereas the Pi, you do need to download installations and you
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
program through the PC and that.
yeah.
And I just find that a little bit inconvenient for me.
Mm.
I don't like anything that does everything for you. I don't like the way modern PCs, especially things like modern Windows and that.
Mm.
Everything's got a prompt. Everything it wants to do everything for you. Do you want to add this to your library? Do you want to create a music gallery? No, I don't. I just want to copy some files. Piss off. You know.
Yeah.
That's what, that kind of thing bothers me. But I like something you can pick up and anybody can instantly drop some stuff on there if you know where to look. And I think Android is really good for that. I don't want an Android phone as it happens. I prefer an iPhone. But as far as like mini processing powerhouses go, I think Android devices are fantastic for emulation.
Mm. Yeah, but you can install RetroArch on there, can't you? And
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean,
yeah,
RetroArch is just basically compiling everything together.
yeah,
It's compiling different emulators together into a one-stop front end. But there's actually better ones out there that allow you to use a wider range of emulators as well.
oh,
And I've
okay.
experimented with a few of those. Yeah.
Mm.
People have been spoiled in recent years by things like hyperspin. People think that hyperspin was just something that just miraculously appeared and made everything run. Hyperspin is just a front end system.
Yeah,
You know, front ends existed when I first started building arcades. They were a bit more rudimentary, but they worked, and I still use a very old front end for when I do my rigs because it's the one that I've tried and tested, and it's extremely lightweight. You know what I mean? I don't believe in a front end system that requires more space and resources to run than the actual games it's going to play. You know, that's my thinking anyway.
yeah. I never used Hyperspin. I used this German one. I can't remember what it was called now. I had to. It was a bought one. I had to buy
Yeah,
it. But you can because I built I built an arcade lightly.
yeah,
I built an arcade machine.
yeah,
Not to your spec, you know, but it worked and it looked cool. But that front end, you could turn it into like a karaoke machine and all those kind of things on there. All the
it was
software was there.
probably Maximus Arcade. I know that was one of them. There's Maximus, and there was another one I'm trying to think of right now. And one of those was actually the origin of Hyperspin. It evolved into becoming Hyperspin, so
Yeah,
it's the same people behind it. So yeah, there were a couple of paid ones, but it's just good to tinker with that stuff yourself. And once you start stripping them back and using the more lightweight stuff, you
yeah.
really get to squeeze performance
I,
out of the system you use.
I love it. I love the tinkering. The only problem is you can get to a point where all you're doing is tinkering and messing
Yeah.
with, and you're not actually doing your hobby. Then, or you're not playing any games, and
Well,
it's like having a list of, oh yeah, I've got 1,000 games or whatever, and you spend more time pressing down, pressing down. Oh, I remember that, pressing down, pressing down, and it's like, oh, an hour's gone by. Oh, I ain't got time to play any games now.
yeah, I think it's a dangerous thing. I think someone was commenting on it recently. I can't remember who brought it up, but they were saying, you know, do you generally, if you're in this hobby, do you genuinely play a lot of games, or do you spend more time cataloging, collecting, and fixing, repairing things? And I've probably got to that stage myself now,
Yeah,
but I always want to play. That's the difference. Some people do all that, and when they realise they've fixed everything and bought everything they want to buy, they're bored. You know, they don't actually want to play the games. I'm different. I like to collect stuff. I like to repair stuff and get it running. And then when it's done, I do like to actually play it and enjoy it. And the opportunity I do get to play, I try and make the most of it. It's like with collecting arcade machines. A lot of people say, you know, oh, I bet you got them all stacked up in your house. And like, you know, I ain't got that kind of room. You know what I mean? My stuff lives in storage most of the time. So when we break them out for events and things like that, I make the most of it. And people, it's become a bit of a standing joke that before, you know, opening at most of our events, you'll always catch me going and you'll always catch me on my Killer Instinct machine because it's one of the few opportunities I get to actually go and stand and play at it because it's my favourite game.
I remember the first time I saw Killer Instinct at Starport, because that was like the place you went on a Sunday, wasn't it?
Stourport was the first place I ever saw it as well.
Yeah, and it was the first. It was the first Starport. Actually, it was the first time I saw a lot of things. The first time I saw the original Mortal Kombat back in
Yeah.
the day, that blew me away. I was like, what's this? And Killer Instinct. You know, the first time I saw that, I was absolutely in love with that game.
Yeah, it is amazing.
But yeah, there's the old arcade where the fair was. I remember playing Battlezone in there, and you know, Super Sprint, and you know, all the old classics.
Well, see, people forget, for us inner city boys, like, we didn't, unless you lived in like the major cities, like, well, there was, but then again, Birmingham was poorly served, but London especially,
Mm.
they had, like, you know, big arcade installations in centres and things like that. If you were in a city like us, your opportunity to play arcades involved either going to your local bowling alley, where there would be a few, and generally not that many, going to Stourport for us in the Midlands
Yeah,
was one of the few places that was like a kind of bank holiday destination, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
Um, or you either it was when you went to on holiday, you know, you went to the beach or something. There's loads of seaside arcades.
yeah. Well, yeah. That I mean, for me, because I think I'm a little bit older than you. It was going to the Chippy.
Oh yeah, there was
Yeah,
definitely the odd
yeah,
one. There was,
yeah.
yeah,
You go to the Chippy,
yeah,
and the staff there would be annoyed at you if you say you buy like a scallop. Yeah, I'll have a scallop. I'll have a
yeah. I'll
scallop.
stand there. I'll
Yeah.
stand there forever, playing.
Yeah, so we had that. Starport was a staple, definitely, every Sunday. I mean, we had Clent as well. Did you ever manage to get to Clent?
Nah, nah, never been.
Yeah, we had Clent up the road, which they got a price. The arcades they had in there, they had the old big black and white Sprint machine in there, which I
Yeah,
remember.
I know the one. Yeah, yeah.
Um, some, I'd love to know what happened to them games before they shut it down. And in Cradley Heath as well, we had the cinema, the Royal Cinema, and
Yeah, cinemas. Yeah.
that turned into an arcade for a while.
Well, the thing is with the inner city arcades, they always fell victim to the obvious problem, which was that immediately after the golden age ended,
Mm.
so the early 80s, once you go into the silver age, any inner city arcades tended to be the hangout of undesirables. And I remember the few arcades that were in the inner city. There was one in Bilston called Majestic, which is a
Okay,
place that we used to hang out a lot at.
Sonny Bilston.
Oh yeah, Sonny Bilston, and the way that was structured was like the front was fruit machines, and it was
Yeah,
technically you had to be 18 to go in.
yeah,
What they ended up doing was knocking their storeroom out just past the attendance kiosk, and they started filling that with vids at the back, and they would only let the local kids in who, like, you know, had been pre-approved or whatever.
yeah.
And that was okay, but then, like, in Wolverhampton we had Broad Street Amusements. That was the first dedicated arcade I remember when we started going there, and I was about 10. So that would have been about 1990. And at that point, it was when fighting games were starting to come out, and they started to, you know, Street Fighter was arrived in 1992. So in 1991, 1992, it was just full of, like, you know, hooky Street Fighters and Mortal Kombat and wherever else.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that place was a cesspit. It was a dive anyway. The
Oh,
people
okay.
who ran it didn't care less, and you just used to get mugged in there. There
All
was people
right.
in there,
Bloody
there was
hell.
stabbings and all kinds of stuff, and it just wasn't a very nice place. They also turned one of the old cinemas into it was Garrick Street Cinema. They changed the old Odeon Cinema into no, it wasn't Odeon. It was just Canon Cinema. That's how far back it was,
Christ.
and that they changed that into an arcade, and that was even worse. That was just full of hoods all the time. So, like, going to the arcade wasn't a pleasant experience in the inner cities. The few you were allowed in as a kid, um, they used to let anybody in because they needed to make the money. So
Yeah.
whoever was in there spending, whether they'd stolen it off other kids or what, they didn't care as long as money was being put into those machines. And there were always crap machines in those kind of places. If you wanted to play good machines, it'd either be our local working men's club. They
Mm.
always had two machines in there. They always had a cocktail and an upright, and it was brilliant because, like, the cocktail would have something like Ring King on, or Galaxian or something like that, and
Yeah.
then the upright would tend to have the kind of I mean, you get into like the later 80s stuff, but, like, I remember playing Moon Patrol on it first there, Rygar, and then there's just loads of different games. They'd always swap them out, like
some classics
and
there, yeah.
I know, yeah. It's like, and that's where a lot of my memories come from. Because on a Saturday night, of course, we'd always be down there, and I would live on the arcades there.
Oh,
Mum
well,
and Dad would be in there getting pissed, and
yeah.
I'd be sat out in the lobby waiting on the arcade, watching all the other kids play, waiting for my turn. You know.
Yeah,
So
I was the same, mate. Exactly the same. Whether we went to the Labour Club or the Liberal Club,
yeah,
or going to the pub on a Sunday. So
every working men's club had
they
one.
all had an arcade. Yeah, I mean
The pubs had them for a while, but then they soon kind of dropped out the pubs.
Well, they were mainly the cocktail ones, aren't they?
Yeah, they would
to my knowledge. Yeah,
cabinet.
yeah.
And you know what? You can't beat a classic British cocktail, because they were based more on well, they tended to be the Japanese cocktail style, not like the Americans. Whenever they refer to a cocktail, they think about the end-to-end design, don't they? The vertical screens and that, and they're probably a better design, to be fair. These have bigger screens than that, but the side, where you were sat on the long side, you were sat facing each other, and you had space on the table for your drinks, and there'd always be like burn marks from fags left on the edge of the glass,
that's it.
Melting the tea moulding, and stains from all the beer spilled on top. And those are some of the fondest memories I have of those machines.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the classic machines, I can put them to where I was when I was a kid. It's like Liberal Club, they had Frogger, the original Frogger, and the Labour Club, they had like this little room with four machines in there, four old machines in there.
Yeah.
It was just. I mean, we had a pub called the Garden House, just down the road from us, and they had Moon Patrol there.
Yeah.
Gallagher.
Yeah.
It was just I loved it. I loved it. And going on holiday as well. I think I mentioned it to you before when we used to go to Rill.
Yeah, Rill was for us in the Midlands. We were the most landlocked place you could be where we're from. So like you had to pick carefully. And we used to holiday on the south coast a lot. So like we had a caravan down in Exmouth, and so there was a load of arcades in Exmouth and in Exeter, all the places along the south coast there. But yeah, when it was like day trips out, it would be like Rill or Blackpool. The other one, once I actually started driving myself, the other one, of course, near to us is Weston-super-Mare.
Oh,
it's a little bit further technically, but it's just straight down the motorway, so it was an easy jaunt when you're in your first car,
Yeah. Oh, Weston, always going down Weston.
Weston's great. He is fantastic, man.
Yeah, Weston was the first time I saw when we went down to Weston. It was the first machine, the R360 machine. When I saw that, I've got an old picture of it somewhere, which I need to find out. I was with Jay at the time.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, and having a go on that, and I think back then, it was £2, which was a lot of money back then.
Ridiculous amount.
Yeah, I'd have only been about 15, 16 maybe.
Sounds about right.
Yeah,
it was about 92, I think.
Yeah.
And
it completely blew me away. Absolutely blew me away.
It's crazy.
And the first time I saw the hydraulic version of Buck Rogers, did you ever get to see that?
No, never saw that.
Yeah, that was at that was at a Haven site in Talaka near Prestatyn. Yeah. But yeah, all these machines. Whenever I go to your shows and I'll see a particular machine, those memories come back, and I'm like, I remember where I was the first time I saw that machine, and it's good. It's good to have that, isn't it?
So these memories are good. That's part of my inspiration. I mean, I think I've spoke to you about like the books that I'm working on, and one of the books I'm actually working on is telling arcade stories about the first time we encountered certain arcade machines, where we found them, what the experience was like. And loads of people have sent me tales that are going to be told in that. And they'll be very much like, we're talking about. And a lot of the places people will remember. And I'm sure a lot of other people will remember the same machines from the same places. It's always interesting to think where those exact machines ended up, because some of those machines are so obscure, you would only have seen them at a very few places in this country. You know, because you've got to remember our arcade history is very different to the rest of the world, because we didn't tend to get original machines very often. The very first couple of machines we did, but then there were often stuff built on license, like Brent Leisure was one of the big ones in the UK. They built a lot of machines on license from the original manufacturers in Japan or America. So we had our own, you know, our own versions of bespoke machines, but most of our history is around, you know, generic jammer cabinets. You know, we had the old woody types, you know, with your faux wood grain on the side. That was the kind of stuff we really grew up with in the 80s in this country. Nothing tended to be original, and so when you did see an original machine that was something special, like you say, the R360, or like the hydraulic ones like Outrun and things like that, there were very few of those imported over here, and that's why they're so hard to get hold of now, because I'm sure the ones that were either exported again once they went past their usefulness, or ended up in landfill, which is sad to think. But
Oh, it really is. I mean that same arcade at Haven. I mean, um, I remember playing Kung Fu Master in there. Yeah, Kung Fu. They had the hydraulic. They had two more hydraulic machines. They had Enduro Racer in there, and Space Harrier. I mean, Space Harrier hydraulic was just out this world. Absolutely out this world. And Zaxxon in there, and Popeye. All these machines. Just when I see them,
the place where we had our caravan, I can still remember in 1990. I remember it was like one of the last years we had the caravan there, and I can still remember the arcade we had on site.
Yeah.
I can still remember machine for machine what machine was in that arcade as I looked around the room. They had one of the few machines that originally in there was the 720 degrees machine, which obviously
the skateboarding one, yeah,
needed a sound machine because of the custom joystick. Then you had Splatterhouse, RoboCop.
Wow.
I think there was Juno First on the end, and as you went round, there was Wardner, there was Karate Champ, and see, I'm closing my eyes because I can see them in my head.
Yeah.
And I remember those machines in order around the room, and I can map out the entire arcade because there were only about 20 cabinets in that room.
It's mad, isn't it, that you can do that? I mean, at our I've just thought at our local swim baths in Hayden Hill. I mean, I remember them having in there. They had RoboCop, and Gauntlet.
Yeah.
You know the big, the 4-player Gauntlet machine.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, you'd spend half hour swimming and then spend 2 hours on them machines, and then you get some chips, wouldn't you, afterwards? So it was that was going swimming.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. It was like a day out thing. I mean, like I was talking about bowling alleys earlier. We had Strikers here in Wolverhampton, which I ended up working at when I was an adult, and that used to have some of the best arcades in the region. And then eventually, that originally they had bowling and Laser Quest Quasar,
yeah,
in the upper section, and that had a massive arcade section in. And then when that stopped becoming popular, they stripped it out, and that became Sega World. And obviously, Sega World was the last kind of big thing before arcades disappeared, wasn't it? Really, the classic arcades.
Yeah. There's loads of memories, absolutely loads of memories. I'll have to send you some.
Definitely, you need to, because I told you I'm putting them all into a book. What's quite cool is the book I'm doing. It's got all these arcade memories in, and like we're doing. There's a mate of mine who he's a top end illustrator.
Okay.
So what he's actually doing is he's creating custom illustrations of the scenes that are being described in the anecdotes and the stories.
Yeah.
So there's going to be like an anecdote, there'll be a picture of it, and then there'll be a feature on the machine that's featured, a review of the game and that. So it'll be a nice sort of compilation of memories. I think it'll take a lot of people back, especially if you're from the Midlands, because there's a lot of input from people in the Midlands. There's about 4 stories in there just of my own. So, and I've got dozens to tell, So, but I'm trying to get input from different people up and down the country,
Yeah, of course, yeah. So is that book planned for this year, or is it it's done when it's done?
That book will be done when it's done, because it's more of a labour of love, that one. But I'm working on a couple of books. The couple of books that I'm doing is because I've had a bit of a health battle the last couple of years, as most people know, And so I've not been able to do the physical stuff I was doing. I've not been able to do my arcade repairs or a lot of the stuff I wanted to do. We haven't been able to event, obviously, because of the pandemic and things like that. So I've been at a loss, and I was looking at things to do. And so last year, Chris approached me again and said, you know, you write for the magazine already. You're doing lots for that. You know, I was doing lots of articles. I'd slowed them down a bit because I wasn't well and I couldn't focus. But then he said, I think you've got, you know, a lot to say on various subjects. So why don't you put it together and maybe, you know, write a book? And I said, do you think people would read it? And he says, well, I think so.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
See what subject you want to do. So I had an idea for 2 books. That was one of them. The other one is intended to be a book, but the way once I started putting it together, I've realised there's more than enough content for probably 3 books. So rather than create an encyclopedia, which would be too expensive to create, it's probably going to be a volume release, 3-part volume. 3-volume release. And so it's going to be about rare and obscure consoles. It's more of a factual thing than anything. But it's not just going to be like a copy paste from like Wikipedia or anything like that. It's about my adventures in collecting, what I've learned about picking things up. And it's going to be very much from the perspective of a British collector and enthusiast. So it's going to be talking about really rare and obscure stuff, the kind of stuff you never played on. Because you couldn't get hold of it. It was too expensive back in the day. It was too hard to get hold of, or was just unknown, you know. So I collect that kind of stuff now. So I thought, well, I can put my thoughts together on that, and I can give people advice on playing those systems now. So that's the main book I'm working on. That's going to be out in a couple of months' time.
Oh, awesome. What's the rarest system you've got, do you think?
It's a difficult one. In the book, I actually cover both rare systems, obscure systems, but I also cover what I call the unattainables, and those are the systems that you want to play on. They exist, but your chances of playing on them are pretty much like non-existent because only 1 or 2 prototypes were ever made, or something like that, or their circulation was so low it's impossible to get hold of. But the rarest systems I own, I mean, the Zeebo's pretty obscure over here. I don't know if you know about the Zeebo.
Huh?
Zeebo's it's a Brazilian console, and it's actually only from a couple of years ago. 2009 it was released. It was a system made by Techno for the Brazilian market, but it was a separate venture from their Techno crap stuff that they were doing with Sega. And it basically runs, it was the first system to be released that has an entirely digital distribution network. So, and because they haven't got a good infrastructure over in Brazil and South America, it relied on a 3G connection. So it wasn't a hardwired dependent system, it was a 3G only system. That was the way they delivered all the content. And basically inside the system, it's basically a glorified smartphone. But in 2009, that was pretty advanced for the time, and it was cut back a little bit, but they had loads of backing. So Data East were behind it, Namco were behind it, Capcom were behind it, and there were quite a few games released for it, not released on any other system. And I've not yet had it out at any of the events. I meant to have it out back in November, but it didn't happen. I cover that in the book, and that system in the UK, there's probably only about 3 people that actually own the console in the UK. So that's how obscure it is. Yeah. Because it was only released in South America, there's not really a big import market. There's an import market from Japan. People know about Japan-only consoles. There's an import market from America because there's loads of American-only consoles. As far as South America goes, I mean, people don't really know that it exists, for one. But when people realise these things, they're going to want to get one. And unfortunately, it's not the easiest thing to get, and it wasn't a cheap system either. No. That one cost me. The guy who had it is from Brazil.
Okay.
He bought it new in Brazil back in the day. He really looked after it. He's the head of the ownership fan club for it, and he runs some of the forums online. But then he emigrated to Australia, So I actually went looking for one. You can find one or two on eBay, but they are generally crap. They're junk, basically, because it's a digital distribution platform and the servers have shut down. You can't get the games anymore. So if you buy one stock from the factory, you've got nothing to play on it apart from like one inbuilt game. So you needed one that had all the games preloaded. Well, I spoke to this guy and he says, I've got one in perfect condition. It's even got the rare controllers that cost you a fortune with it. And it's got every single game made for the system preloaded onto it. They only released 57 games on it. And it's got every single game installed on it. And he says, I can let you have it, but I'm in Australia now. So this hunt took me everywhere for it, and I had a bit of a back and forth with him. And unfortunately, it didn't work out cheap because I acquired it during the pandemic when things were all up in the air anyway.
Oh, Christ.
But that was probably the most expensive and rarest console that I've got.
Yeah, yeah. Are they all? Are they original games as well, or are there some?
Yeah, it's got motion controllers, and it's got games on par with like the early Wii stuff.
Oh, well.
It's got its own, it's got its own. I think they're called Zeboids rather than the Me characters. But you created your own avatar. You've got its own online service. It had its own keyboard. It had its own social network, and you could use your characters in the game. So there's like a good football game. There's not a bowling. There's kayaking. There's all kinds of motion controlled sporting games. It's got a lot, and these aren't like crappy 2D things either. They're all polygonal games. But then it also had like really good ports and exclusive ports. There's an exclusive port of Ridge Racer for it, which wasn't released on any other system. And it looks very much like cross between Ridge Racer Revolution and the Nintendo 64 port. There's a port of Tekken 2, which wasn't seen on any other system, and it's on par with the PlayStation version. The only thing it doesn't have is all the speech samples and the FMV, but the characters are full polygonal renders. The stage is all scroll and everything round. It's really good. It's got the mobile port of Resident Evil 4. I don't know if you ever played that.
No.
The mobile port of Resident Evil 4, it plays in like set little chapters, and it's not the greatest version, but it's still quite cool to play what is essentially a 6th generation game on a mobile powered platform. But then there's also perfect ports of Pac-Mania, Joe and Matt Caveman Ninja, Street 2 on the Neo Geo. What else is on there? I'm trying to think. Not Burger Time. Food Fight. What's it called? But there's loads of like good ports on there, and the best game on there by far is the port of Double Dragon, and it's the only. It only exists on the Zebo. It's an exclusive Zebo port, and it's completely different to every other Double Dragon made, and it is brilliant. It's got a massive move set. You can control all the enemy bosses as well. It's got versus mode. It's fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of the conversions for Double Dragon, they never got it right, did they?
No, they never did.
You've got to play the arcade version, and that's it.
Well, this port, I don't know if you ever played the Game Boy Advance version. Have you ever played that?
No.
The Game Boy Advance version looks a lot like the arcade, but the main two characters are more like the versions from the later ones, like Double Dragon Neon and things like that. So they've got wider move sets. If you ever played the PC Engine CD version of Double Dragon 2, it borrows some of the moves from that. It's honestly, it is a fantastic game, and when I break it out at the events, I know there's a few people going to go mad for it. Swain is actually looking to play it. Dean Swain, he's dying to play it, so I'm going to be breaking that out for him to play, because it's an unemulated system as well, so you cannot play those games through emulation at all. You have to play it on a Zebo, so that's why nobody's ever seen them, and that's why it's such a special machine.
Right, yeah, that does give it that extra bit of uniqueness, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
That's really cool.
There's a few systems like that, though. I mean, the Pioneer Laser Active, that's not emulated still to this day, and that's got a few exclusive titles on there. And that's another one that unfortunately broke the bank to own, but not not because of its rarity, but because of how unreliable they are and all the repairs you have to have done to them.
Right. Okay. It is a difficult question for you. Right. What would you have as your favourite console?
SNES.
Okay,
Easy.
wow.
That's the easiest question ever.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Easiest question ever. The SNES, in my opinion,
Yeah.
is it is. As far as I'm concerned, it was the peak of gaming for me.
See, mine
It
was
was the what?
PC Engine.
Oh, PC Engine. Well, see, the SNES was like it was the one and only time that Nintendo led their generation technically. It was the one and only time they did it because they changed their strategy. Sega always wanted to be out first, so they never had the best tech because they wanted to be first to market. Other people, all the third wheels were all experiments, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Nintendo always liked to be out, and they would usually delay it, but they would never add anything to the experience. Whereas with the SNES, they got it right. They were the kind of last of the major 16 bits to arrive of the fourth generation, and they got it right. They made it expandable through on cartridge chips and things like that, and that gave the console a lifespan far beyond what it should have had. And I just think the games on it were amazing for the time. And you got to remember, the early to mid 90s was the biggest period of innovation and the last time when third parties were trying to get in on the console games. So the competition was fierce because you had efforts by Atari, Philips, Sony were obviously trying to get in on the game at the time.
Yeah.
Then you had 3DO, Neo Geo. Obviously, they couldn't do it with the AES; they wanted to do it with the CD. And there were a load of chances at the time, and because of how strong the Nintendo and Sega rivalry was, nobody got a look in, and that was largely due to them both getting it right. I think the Mega Drive was probably the peak for Sega, and the SNES was definitely the peak for Nintendo. And you got to remember that as good as the Nintendo 64 was supposed to be, it took far too long to come to market. It undid a lot of what they'd done with, the SNES, and Nintendo's fortunes were completely shagged until the Wii came along. The GameCube did nothing for them, so Nintendo were on the verge of bankruptcy at one point because of how bad the decisions they made with the release of the Virtual Boy, Nintendo 64, and the choices they made with the GameCube. It set them too far back. As good as our systems may be remembered, the SNES was just the finest, and it represented. It was the time when it caught up with the arcades in terms of power. The games, every game, just like wowed me. You know what I mean? Everything just looked so good. They played so good. You had the 6-button controller, and not forgetting, the SNES joypad has been the template for every joypad ever since.
That's a good point.
Joypad.
Especially retro style as well. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it is. Well, the SNES pad evolved into the PlayStation pad, and that was a direct result of Nintendo jilting Sony over the production of the SNES CD. So the PlayStation controller design was directly created from the SNES design because they realised that 4-button layout, the D-pad where it was, the shoulder buttons, the select and start in the middle, and the kind of dog bone shape was like it was the way to go forward, and every controller ever since has been based on it.
And that's interesting that you chose. What would your favourite arcade be?
Killer Instinct.
Definitely
Killer Instinct. It is a more difficult question. Killer Instinct is the one I gravitate back to because it was probably the last great arcade machine that kind of blew me away. In the
so many, isn't there? I mean, I always choose Karate Champ. I think as my ultimate classic.
Are you a big fan of that?
Absolutely.
The controls infuriate me though.
I do they? Yeah, it was. I think it was because I was always into martial arts. So that for me was I always gravitated to the combat games. So when Double Dragon came out, it was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Mortal Kombat, I was never really a fan of. The first time I saw the original Street Fighter. That was
Yeah,
hilarious. That was so shit. When Street Fighter 2 came out, well, that was a
that
game
was a different
changer.
story.
That was a
That
game
was a game
changer.
changer.
But
Well, that was another thing with the SNES. Like this one of the SNES's big selling points was that it was getting Street Fighter 2, and that was like the arcade's second wind. You know what I mean? After its heyday in the 80s, the arrival of Street Fighter 2 and all the clones it spawned, SNES had it first, and it had the 6-button controller straight at the back. So as awkward as that may have been for a fighting game, it was there and it was ready to work, and the port was fantastic.
it
You
was.
know,
Spent hours and hours and hours playing that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
All it was, I mean, it downsampled the sound effects. There's a few layer things missing, and the animation frames were a bit short, but everything else was there. They got the arcade gameplay perfect, and that wasn't an easy thing to do. That I always think that was the problem they had with ports, and it still existed right up until the late 90s. Getting the arcade experience was always difficult. No
Yeah.
matter how good the technology got. If you look at something like, I always use Sega Rally as an example because, like, Ridge Racer was the arcade hardware was essentially the same as the PlayStation hardware. It was a little bit more advanced, but the hardware was the same, so it wasn't really a port from the arcade to PlayStation. All they did was drop it to 30 frames a second and downsample the polygons. When it came to Sega Rally, like the Saturn was supposed to be the arcade. It was supposed to be the home equivalent of the AM2, AM2 group's work in the arcades, but it wasn't. And Sega Rally on the Saturn just doesn't play anything like the arcade version. It's a good game, but you can't. It's like chalk and cheese. They're two very different games. The port of Daytona as well. It just wasn't anywhere near what the arcade version was.
The,
The Dreamcast version, obviously, far
yeah.
better.
Yeah.
But the Saturn didn't translate as well. So with the SNES getting the gameplay so perfect for a fighter, it was a brand new concept to have a fighting game that allowed the combos and the stringing and the way it all functioned, and to translate that so well to the home. That kind of showed me that was the time that arcades their day was done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that is. I mean, I used to work in a computer game shop in Brum when I was 17, called Microbyte.
I know it.
Yeah, and we only had Japanese imports, so we had all the Japanese imports before the UK consoles came out. So
Yeah.
so we had the Zzap Mega Drive, we had the Famicom, we had the Neo Geo, and we had the PC Engine. And I always remember playing Sonic the Hedgehog on the Mega Drive, which I thought was the Mega Drive, and then the PAL version came out, and I was like, "What's happened to the music?" And then you're playing it, and it's like, "Why is this so slow?" So
I admit to being disappointed myself with that
yeah,
because even though once we started playing, we never really noticed the disparity between 50 and 60 hertz, did we, back in the day? But then when it got to that generation, we started to see the Japanese and American originals. You started to see the difference, but we took it for granted. But the first time I played Sonic, after reading about it in magazines, that it was this blistering fast game, when I actually played it for the first time on like a PAL Mega Drive, because that was the only thing I had exposure to,
yeah,
I was like, this ain't that fast, really.
mm,
And of course, it was misleading because the advert at the time with the Cyber Razor cut and all that from Sega used to show Sonic at this blistering speed, and it was like they were obviously using the 60 hertz version,
yeah,
which is noticeably faster.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I know where you're coming from on that one. It was disappointing.
So you mentioned about your health earlier on. Is
Yeah.
that something you want to chat about? Is that
Yeah,
that?
it's pretty, and people know. So I mean, sure,
Yeah.
some of the people seeing this know. I mean, I've got a bit of a bad history. I just got bad genes. I think I always
Mm,
have a lot of bad luck when it comes to my health.
yeah.
I had a stroke when I was 26. That affected me massively, and I thought that was my. I thought that was always going to be my one bad thing. You know, I thought that would be the scare, and that would be it. And then obviously 2 years ago, started developing symptoms and found out I got testicular cancer. So that was that put me out of commission. That was during COVID, so it was the scariest time to get a cancer diagnosis, because the NHS just couldn't handle anything, and you couldn't get seen. So it took me best part of 2 years to get diagnosed. And when it comes to cancer, that's not a waiting time you generally got. So I want to say lucky. I still don't know how it will play out long term. I'm still getting certain issues which could be related to it, although all the scans and the blood tests are showing that I'm technically clear now.
That's good.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Like, you have scans every 6 months, you have blood tests every 3 months.
Yeah.
And you have to report into your oncology doctor every so often. But yeah, basically, they reckon if it hasn't come back after 2 years, the chance of it coming back falls to something like 2%. So, you know, that's the goal you're looking for, 2 years. But yeah, it was a scary thing to get, because they weren't seeing me at the time. It took too long to get diagnosed, and I was very vocal about it. I shared it on social media because I think it's something that's not spoken about enough.
No.
Blokes are funny with their illnesses anyway. I mean, like my dad, my granddad, they're the kind of generation where they hid every illness they had. And unfortunately, that can cost lives, you know, when it comes to things like cancer. And I believe in the opposite. It's like, just deal with it head on. Don't be ashamed to talk about stuff. And the amount of people, I started talking about what I'd gone through, getting my diagnosis, having the operation, and then obviously mine had spread, so I had to have radiotherapy as well. It was all unpleasant, not as bad as some other cancers, and I was trying to kind of communicate to people that, you know, get yourself checked. You know, I'm an advocate of that. Get yourself checked, talk about it. And while I was going through it, the amount of blokes who actually contacted me and said, listen, I've had a problem for a while. And I'm like, well, listen, I had a doctor. Go to your doctor. Just go to your doctor and get it dealt with and push for it.
Yeah.
For God's sake, get it pushed for us. If you don't, I says, you might not be here to tell the tale, you know. Testicular cancer, I'll tell you now, testicular cancer is officially now the most survivable of all cancers. It's one of the rarest to get, but it's also one of the most survivable, depending on the type you get. And I had the most survivable type of the most survivable cancer. So it was lucky in a way, but because how long it had been, it shouldn't have spread, but it did. It's the type of cancer that doesn't generally spread, but the radiotherapy was enough. I didn't have to go through chemotherapy, thankfully, because that creates a whole new set of issues. But yeah, it was a heavy thing to deal with, and I'm kind of gone through that. But now I've got another set of issues going on. I've got issues related to changes in testosterone in my body. I've now got bone weakness and things like that, which I'm trying to get dealt with. It's creating issues with concentration, my eyesight, my hearing. I've got pressure build-up in my neck and in my head because they suspect I've got some damage to the base of my neck, the bones in my spine, and it's creating problems all over my body. So I'm having to deal with that now. So yeah, there's always something going on with me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's put things a little further back, because I wanted to come back to events last year.
Yeah.
Even though technically we weren't allowed to start doing events fully unrestricted until October last year. That was officially the guidelines actually said from October all restrictions that were in place are now lifted. Events are one of the last things see to get full conditions lifted. Before that, even though people started doing things in 2021, there's a whole load of legal stuff you had to do for an event. You had to get certification from the council to say you're allowed to do it. You had to show that you were COVID safe. There was a load of conditions. The number of people under one roof in one space had to be limited, and it wouldn't allow you to do a gaming event properly. I know a lot of gaming events went ahead, unfortunately, and I know a lot of people went to them, but a lot of them were actually breaking the law. I actually looked at the conditions and I looked at the footage from the events, and they were clearly breaking the law, and I just wasn't prepared to take that kind of risk. So I always knew getting back to Revival would come after 2022.
Yeah. And
obviously the cancer thing set that back a bit, and I'm still not great now. I'm still going through the going through the waves a bit with it, but I'm coming back to it now, and it's going to get better. And I can tell you now, and I haven't told anybody to this point, apart from the people and the team.
Yeah.
Revival's coming back next year.
Yeah. That's
I,
amazing.
I know I've talked about it. I haven't got a date or anything like that. I don't even have a venue, but we've made the decision. We've been rolling with the ideas, and Revival's coming back next year.
That's awesome.
Without a doubt. And this is the first time I'm actually talking about it.
Cool.
We made the decision the other day.
Get me name down then. Get me name down. I'll have my ticket.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's a definite.
Yeah, it's coming back next year. It's most likely going to be downsized because we need to be able to handle it, and I'm still not in full health.
Okay.
Plus, I'm also assisting with events for Chris as well. But we're working together on a plan where Revival, Crash, and Zzap Live will all kind of flow over the course of a year. So the same people will be behind them all in a way. It's just that we're going to space them out to make it best for ourselves because the same people are involved in them. Yeah. But yeah, Revival's going to come back, and it will be a fully fledged Revival. It might not be full scale like it used to be at Bescott because things have changed a lot. The demographics changed. The event costs have changed. But we're going to come back with a proper all-encompassing Revival. So there'll be arcades, there'll be pins, there'll be every kind of gaming. There's going to be special areas dedicated to the rare and obscure consoles. So you're going to see some stuff you won't have seen at any other event. There's going to be special sections from collectors where they focus on their main collecting. So they're going to put out stuff that they're majorly interested in. It's going to be cool. We'll have talks and everything back, and it'll get back to the way it was.
Oh, amazing! Any? I know it's early days yet, but any ideas of venues or where it will be? You're still keeping it in the Midlands. That's
It'll
the
be
main one.
Yeah, that's without a doubt. Yeah, it will be Midlands. It'll be somewhere in the Midlands. Not sure where yet. The more local to me, the better because it works better logistically. Okay. But I'm not limiting it super close. If I'm going to need to expand a bit, won't be Birmingham either because Birmingham's too inaccessible. Yeah, the congestion charges really ruined that. As well.
Christ, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that has absolutely killed any concept of doing things within inner city Birmingham. It's just not accessible. It's not practical anyway. No. So it will be in the Midlands, most likely be Black Country somewhere. It'll be a good size again. It'll be. I mean, if anyone remembers the very last one we did in 2020. We're looking to do at least that size.
Okay, yeah.
And we're looking at hotels this time. So we're looking a bit like we did with the early revivals. We're looking to do it at a hotel. So we've got the event space downstairs. All the rooms are on site, upstairs from the venue floor, and hopefully there'll be plenty of parking. So that's the way we're looking to go with Revival from this point on.
I think that's the best way to look at it because you literally you've got the whole package there.
Yeah.
Because if you're coming from outside of the Black Country, you've got somewhere to stay straight away. Yeah. You can say to the hotel, look, this is the amount of people we're going to have on that event, so we could pretty much fill your rooms. Give us exclusivity on that, and you can get the prices down for people. So there's that. You've got your car parking, easy to find. You're going to have a bar there, probably somewhere to eat straight away. It's all there. It's an absolute great idea.
Well, I think it's the way to go. I mean, I've looked a lot at the American conventions, and most American conventions, they don't use convention halls. They use hotels because they tend to have big grand hotels where they've got big event spaces on the ground floor. It's all in-house then. People might moan a little bit about the beer prices because hotels charge a bit more, but the convenience of having everything there in one space and being able to stay on site is invaluable. It simplifies so much. Now, we haven't got as many grand hotels like that over here, so I've got to shop around carefully. I would have gone back to Dunstall, but their prices have become they're not workable anymore. Okay. Post-COVID, so much has changed. The cost of logistics has gone through the roof. So we got a box clever. But unfortunately, the one in Kenilworth where we're doing Crash and Zzap Live.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah. They're great venues. It's a great venue there, but unfortunately, it wouldn't work for Revival because it's a different kind of atmosphere we try to get, if you know what I mean. And it just doesn't quite have the space that we need to do what we need to do. So
which arcade machines? They're bigger, aren't they?
Well,
Bigger
that's
and
the thing.
heavier.
See, yeah. See, some hotels that they're quite nice and they don't really want you coming in and tearing up their dance floors and their carpets by dragging arcade machines around. So that's why we've got to be very clever and we've got to go and kind of argue our case with a few of them. But there's a few locally to here which are looking good. There's a couple up in Cannock, which is really good news because Cannock is easy access off the M6, which we're looking at, and they're big places and they've got big event spaces for up to 1,000 people. So that'll be on par with the last crash in terms of size and content.
Yeah.
Maybe on par with the early revivals at Bescott, where we only had the one room. So yeah, that's the kind of space we're looking for. And I'm speaking to a few places at the moment. Bescott is done with now. It's not a practical place to use. And Dunstall Racecourse, they are still contacting me and asking me to come back. So maybe if I need to go and twist their arm a bit. You know what I mean? If I can do that, then we probably go back to Dunstall because Dunstall's really good.
I mean, I've been going to Dunstall for years and years because of the computer shows I used to have there on a Sunday.
Yeah, but still older.
Yeah, but the thing is though, it turned into a DVD, Blu-ray, and printer inkjet show.
It's a different thing.
So
I mean,
I stopped going.
Getting your technology is too easy to do online now. It used to be a thing because nobody knew where to get that stuff, but everyone knows where to go directly online for it now. So the computer fairs are kind of dead. They still hold them there, but they've been downsized massively. And it like you say, it's just printers, and it's not even the hooky DVDs and stuff anymore because nobody needs them.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it? This is it.
Yeah.
Because everybody was going there for the blank CDs, weren't they? And
the computer fairs actually were the first place I ever saw a PlayStation 3. Somebody had an imported PlayStation 3, and they put it up on a projector screen there as you walked in. And I'm trying to think what game was released. Was it MotorStorm or something? There was like a racing game, wasn't there?
Oh, the one where you were on a bike.
You could be on a bike,
like a trail bike. Yeah,
there was a bike. There was the stock cars and the buggies and stuff like that. I can't think what it was called, but I think that was like the launch title or something.
I think it was MotorStorm.
It might have been MotorStorm, something like that. And they had it up on the screen in there, and everybody was just crowded around waiting for a turn on it. And I remember having to keep charging up the controller because it was dying so quick. But yeah, they had that at the computer fair, and I think they were trying to sell it on for like a massively overinflated price because they were like, oh look, it's not out for another month here yet, and things like that. And I was like, that's one good thing actually I think has changed over the years is that the global marketplace means we're never last to get stuff anymore. Like back in the day, they'd release something in Japan, and it'd be like 12 months, 18 months before we got it over here. And that sucked. I hated that.
Oh, the whole importing thing. Yeah, it was...
But that's why the grey imports were so popular, though, weren't they? Because it was a way of getting the console a lot sooner. Yeah. My mate imported an American SNES just to play Final Fantasy 3, well, which is 6, and that was a good one. I remember seeing a PlayStation in the dodgy games shop in Wolverhampton about 6 months before it came out over here, and I was blown away by it there.
Yeah, I was quite lucky being able to work in that shop that I did, where we literally just because the other part of the business was back then was Spectrum, Amstrad, and your Commodore 64 games, but then also we had an Atari ST section, and obviously your Commodore Amiga section. And then the consoles were literally just... I mean, we had the first Japanese Game Boy, which was exactly the same as the UK one, to be fair.
Yeah.
But it was just the Japanese one. But it was good. It was a good time. Your Kickstarter, mate, for the Specky Next. Do you will that ever be finished, or is it dead in the water, or?
Oh, do you mean? Sorry, you mean my
retro revival? Yeah. I think it was a Kickstarter, wasn't it? Was it Kickstarter?
No. There's a long story behind that. There was, I did a game originally back in 2013. Is when I actually made the game.
Yeah.
And I made it as an arcade game.
That's it.
And that was done through a Kickstarter. And the Kickstarter was literally just to raise enough money to build the machine itself.
Right.
because it was an actual arcade game. I built an arcade game from it.
Right.
And I literally raised £1,000
Yeah.
to build the machine
Yeah.
and create the game, and then I did a load of I did a release of that game on like a CD and sent it out to people, and people paid to put their faces in it or their name in it or whatever.
Okay.
So that's how I designed the game.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years ago, when the Spectrum Next was out, Mike Ware wanted to convert it for the Spectrum Next, so I was helping him with that. It started. It got kind of about a third done, but then because I started to have my health problems, because the events kind of took over my life a bit, and because things got a little bit crazy, I kind of got distracted. So we released the demo version. That demo version is on every Spectrum Next distribution now.
Yes, played it. Yeah.
Two stages long. There's actually, I think there's about 5 stages done altogether. Out of there were going to be, well, there was 10 on the arcade original. There's going to be 12 on this one because I need to split some stages. But I've got to be honest, I just got distracted with everything, so I honestly don't know.
That's fair enough.
Where Mike Ware wants to go with it. I'd like to, but obviously I'll get my books out. I'm going to get my book out of the way, first book out of the way.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to see how I get on with it. It takes, doing something like that takes a lot of time at a PC, whereas my writing, I can just literally type that in on a phone and write on my phone. And it's an easy thing to do. The problem I've got with my concentration and focus at the moment, I'm getting issues with looking at computer screens for too long. So like doing like detailed pixel work and stuff like that, it's a bit difficult for me to do, if you know what I mean. So I can't really commit, if you know what I mean. I've done a lot of extra bits for it, but then I don't know. It's one of those things that kind of just it's constantly on burn, if you know what I mean. It's not forgotten about. It's just like. It's just a back project, you know what I mean? So we'll see where we go with that.
Yeah. Well, you know,
I'd like to finish it.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you do, because it just seems such a great game, and
it's a cool little game.
And the next needs content.
Well, we wanted to add a 2-player mode to it as well, which the arcade version didn't have.
Yeah.
And it'd be a 2-player versus mode, and we wanted to put in a sprite editor. So basically, you could knock up yourself a little 8x8 sprite of your head and swap it onto the characters.
Oh, that's brilliant.
We were looking at for doing that.
Yeah.
But we were going to put a load of preset characters in, so you could pick from any member of the team to play as, and it'd be like it was going to be like a versus thing, because the arenas would be set up a bit like Bomberman. And then what would happen is there'd be like an enemy rush, so you'd have like a timer. Load of enemies come out, a load of collectibles appear, and the idea is to take out as many enemies, but you could also tag each other, you know, to score, freeze the opponents and things like that. So we're going to work that in, but I don't know. We'll see what happens with it. Yeah. The demo's there anyway for everyone to enjoy, and we'll see what happens with that. I'll get the book out of the way, and then we'll take a look at that. And if my health's getting better and I can focus on it, then we'll carry on with it.
Mate, I could literally talk to you all day about games.
I know.
Now you've got your own YouTube channel, haven't you? Is it Yam Yam Gaming?
Yam Yam Retro Gaming.
Yeah, Yam Yam Retro Gaming. So is that where people can find you? You're gonna carry on doing videos for that?
Yeah. Well, I started that up mainly just before COVID. I was doing a few little live streams. They're nothing professional, but I did a few live streams covering my pickups and things like that, and a few games. But I've done a lot of bits on the rare consoles on that I bought, and you can find a lot of information there. I'd like to pick that up again at some time, but again, it's finding the time to do it all. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm trying to find enough hours in the day to do everything, and at the moment, because I'm not that well, I'm trying to pace myself. That's why the book's got my focus. But yeah, again, I'd like to do more of that.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just a matter of picking and choosing what I can do now. That's the reason I actually wanted to simplify the event, because if the event doesn't take a year of planning, it means I've got extra time in my year to do things like, you know, finish making a game, to do another book, you know what I mean? So if I can simplify the events where they only take 3 to 6 months of planning, then I can go and still enjoy a great event.
Yeah.
But it won't be as much hard work, and I won't lose as much sleep over it.
Yeah. Because you're still part of the Crash events and the Zzap the Zzap events as well, aren't you?
Yeah. We're helping with them. The idea was Chris asked me he wanted to start them back up, and the deal was when we left when we parted ways on Revival was that if he ever wanted to do events again, he would come through me. That was what we agreed. So he wanted to come back. He asked if he could use Bescott for the last one, and then he asked if I could provide any support if the team wanted to do it. So I gave him the option. I wasn't very well, still not very well now, but I'm still providing equipment to it, still helping promote it. I'm still wrecking the venues and doing the floor plans and things like that. But I'm not the one losing sleep over where the tickets are selling anymore. So that's my input. Chris is managing all that kind of stuff, and I'm just taking care of for him, just providing him with bodies, providing machines and equipment, and a bit of moral support, basically.
Yeah.
So, most recently, we're pissing about with drones, doing drone shots of venues, and seeing how we can work that into the event. So I might be bringing along the drone to the next event, and we'll be doing something quite special with a 360-degree camera and a drone at the next event. So
Okay, that sounds interesting.
let's see how that goes.
Yeah. Mate, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you. Really has.
Yeah, you too, man.
We'll have to do this again at some time.
I know. Well, I wanted to catch you at the Black Country Gaming Fair last week, but you didn't go, did you?
You know why though, didn't you? I was at RCM.
Oh, of course you were.
Yeah, I'd even put my name down to say, yeah, I'll be there. And but no, we were well, the RCM event, the gathering was on the Saturday.
Yeah.
And obviously we always stay over at at the Ibis Budget, and we was on our way back.
I was looking to go. I will be going to an RCM thing soon. I'll be going to the Extra Life game event, going there.
Awesome. That'd be good.
I would definitely be going to that one this time.
Yeah.
I'll try and get to a couple more things at RCM, but I've got to be careful how far I go at the moment and what I'm doing. I'm not actually driving at the moment because I've had issues in my eyesight and things like that. It's not really good for me to be driving, so I've not been going far because I'll burn out pretty quickly. But I went to, like I say, the Black Country Gaming event, and those are going to be regular now. I'll do a shout out for Dana because the first one went really well, and they're looking to repeat it now, probably on a monthly basis. So every month there'll be a little market at that place in Brierley Hill. So the Midlands.
That's good.
Yeah, so the Midlands is getting its own little gaming thing once a month. It'd be nice just for people just going shopping to just hook up and just get 10 minutes chat, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, if nothing else, even if you're not in the market for anything in particular. But I know you wanted my tea towel that I got from there.
Oh, that was it. Well, it's got Black Country on it, so.
Exactly. I've got that right here, actually, behind me in the kitchen. Black Country Retro Gamer, fantastic.
Yeah. So was that just for you, or were they actually selling them?
No. There's a guy there. He does the prints for a few people. He does T-shirts and stuff as well. He'd actually got a stall with a load of Black Country goods on. So he got car stickers, window stickers. He got bags and all kinds of stuff and flags and things like that. And he just got this one on the front. And I said, "Oh, tell me you've got more of that." Yeah. and when he said, I said, "Tell me you've got more of those." He says, "Yeah, I have." And he got a bag full of them. I says, "I'll have one of them." So I just saw. I said to him, I said, it was the one that actually had. There was that on the mug that had a reference to being a Black Country gamer on it. And I says, I've got to have that. So I'll pick that up. So he might be at the next Revival as it happens. I took his number, so I'll have him come along. Got to represent for the Midlands, didn't we?
Absolutely. I mean, that's well. When we get to the RCM, we're taking over now because there's me, Jason, Dave.
Yeah.
Wayne Robbins has started to go.
Yeah.
So we get you there as well. That's it. We'll take over. and Andy's such a lovely guy. Love seeing Andy.
Yeah, really Andy's nice when he's not stressed. When he's stressed, he's a different bloke.
I can imagine. Mate, it's been wonderful, and we'll do this again. And obviously, we'll hook up at the market or one of the events.
Yeah, definitely.
I end up just talking to people. I'm a nightmare for it. I don't play any games. But I just love the atmosphere and love being there. So how does it?
It'll be good, man. We got Zzap live in August, and we got Crash live again in November, and then obviously next year now we're looking at doing Revival. Will probably be late spring, I would imagine. We're trying to get into the regular season. It just depends what's available at the places we're looking at. So, but yeah, Revival will be back 2024 for definite.
Awesome.
Sorry it's taken long, but you know, health comes first.
You gotta look after you're first, mate. You gotta look after your health.
Well, if I ain't available, it's an easy thing to sub somebody out for, you know.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Mate, it's been great.
Yeah, it's been cool.
I'll speak to you soon.
Definitely. See you later.
See you later, matey.